you're good. Here we go.
Fire in the hole.
Yep.
All right, Nick, what did you think? What did we get done today?
We got a timing belt on and we got a successful turnover. Cannot wait to hear her fire up.
Nick, thanks for your help. I think
my pleasure, anytime.
Yeah, we are on our way, so stay tuned. We'll tell you what we got done today. Good morning and welcome back to Grind Time with Rudy, the Guys with Rides YouTube channel. And in this latest installment, I'm going to take you through what it took to put the timing belt back together using an aftermarket Porken Tensioner. On Monday, we finished the install of the Porken Tensioner and the timing belt and got it to a point where it was ready to put all the other components on. This video is going to cover that. On Tuesday, we reassembled everything else on the engine and tried to start it, and we seem to have a fuel issue. I'm going to save what we find on that for the next installment. For now, I want to take you through the install of the Porken Tensioner, because if you've been following along, the two attempted rebuilds of the factory tensioner was a bust, and I'm really pleased with the 928s R Us Porken Tensioner. In particular, I want to give a shout out to Roger there, who was very helpful, very knowledgeable, and we only made one call to him to clarify something, and all is good. Thanks again, Roger. Do appreciate it. So for $450, I ordered the Porken Tensioner with the air pump kit. My rationale was twofold. I really wanted the car to look somewhat stock with the air pump. I wanted to keep it here in New Jersey, even though emissions are no longer an issue on a car this old. But then the biggest thing, I'm glad I ordered the air pump, because if I hadn't, I would have had to figure out what fan belt to use. I'm not sure if the non-air pump kit comes anyway. So let me take you through the components for the $432 kit. Upper left corner of this picture is the optional air pump bracket and the hardware that comes with it. Moving clockwise, the cylinder with the 3 mounting holes and what looks like a grenade pin is actually an Audi timing belt tensioner cylinder. It's said to be much more reliable. You don't have to keep it filled with oil, and it's much more compact. Moving to the right of that is the tensioner wheel that comes with it. The system actually eliminates a second wheel that the factory system has. Right below that is what looks like a rocker arm that keeps the tensioner on the system as the system runs. In the lower left corner is the mounting bracket that mounts to the engine block. And there's some things you have to do with that. And then finally in the lower right is all of the hardware that is supplied with this kit. So the components are pretty straightforward. Let me take you through everything you have to do. There's some things you do on the bench to prepare it. You actually have to put some of the components in the car, then take it back, bench assemble it before putting it in the car. But what you're going to see is once it's installed, the whole finagling with dealing with having to adjust the tension on the belt, and then the need 2,000 miles later to readjust it is eliminated with this system. Let me prep this here. The first thing we're looking at is the front of the engine block. This is a close-up where the original factory Porken Tensioner mounts. What the designer of the Porken Tensioner recommends as a first step is you fill, there's this hole here, it actually is drilled through to an oil galley area. What he recommends is putting axle grease or front wheel bearing grease in that hole to block it off before you put the threaded rod in. So you see me packing the hole with grease, of course wiping it off, and you chase the grease into the back of the hole with one of the M8 nuts supplied. Once you do that, clean off the excess, the threads inside, and then this threaded rod, it's a dual threaded rod. It's tough to see with my paw here, but there you go. You put seal locker on the install side, rotate that in, and that'll be tightened down later. Now in this step, you see the mounting plate. You have to dry fit this mounting plate to test a couple of things. We're loosely fitting the mounting bolts that'll be put in later. Just tightening it down because we have to check for clearance of the Audi tensioner cylinder in this sequence. So now I'm mounting the tensioner, and you're going to see, so now it's hanging on one bolt, and I'm bringing that over. And if you notice that aluminum bracket that goes off to the left, notice how that's the Audi cylinder is touching that. That's the air conditioner compressor bracket. I'll talk about that in a minute. So again, I'm just loosely fitting the cylinder to this, putting it a little bit, putting some tension on it. And we're supposed to run this piece of paper. You saw the piece of paper is jammed, and here's a shot of the cylinder actually touching the bracket. They recommend filing that away so that there's a gap, because I'm assuming this may get some inertia to it, and they want to make sure you have as much free play here as possible. Now I get to so I've removed the cylinder, and now with a rough cut file, I'm taking off just enough material on the edge of that bracket to make room for that Audi cylinder. See, now we've got plenty of room for that cylinder. All right, so back on the bench, we now put everything together. The tensioner wheel goes on, and actually that bolt was incorrect. That's the shipping bolt. You use the washers, but not the, there's the correct bolt to use. And I go in, and I tighten this to 17 foot-pounds. And then there's that rocker arm fixture that keeps the tension in check when the system's in place. The wheel, I believe, you tension to 17 foot-pounds, and this rocker arm to 24. I'm about to show that. There's this little figure 8 looking device that has to goes underneath that rocker arm and gives it the correct clearance relative to the idler wheel. So with everything finger tight, that gets tightened to 17. The wheel's getting tightened to 24. And it's ready for install back into the car. So there you see, there's a great shot of the Porken tensioner going in. Now there's that stud with the nut on it, that you put a nut on, adding all the other bolts. Now this section here, if you recall from an earlier one, this is the water pump, and that cap nut you see with the red thread locker, that's anaerobic sealer. That is where the second idler for the factory unit resided, and that used the shoulder bolt, a special shoulder bolt, the one I broke off. So now that gets replaced with this because the extra idler wheel is no longer needed in this kit. So this comes with the kit. It's a cap nut with a copper washer that compresses as you tighten it, and between that and the anaerobic seal, keeps the coolant from coming through on the car. All right. There's no torque spec on that, but you can see it's squeezed. For all the rigmarole about putting the water pump in twice, I had to take this one bolt out one more time. In my particular car, the 85, and I think it's the first year of the 32 valve, and I think for a couple of years, I could be longer, the factory actually put a tension warning light on the system. So it's a dashboard light. On this vintage of 928 behind me, you have to do something with the light, otherwise the warning light will always be on. So you're seeing me back out this water pump nut and putting it back in with what's essentially an electrical clip for that light. All right, here's where things get real. Now we're going to put the Following the instructions, we're running it around the timing belt around the crankshaft first. Then that's me zooming in on the oil pump, getting it taut. All right, so now that I've got it around the belt around the crankshaft and the oil pump, the instructions are to rotate the camshaft, the driver's side bank, rotate the camshaft one tooth clockwise to put the belt on, and then rotate it back one tooth to tighten it. What I'm about to do is I'm going to mark the tooth so that I know I've only moved it one. Up to this point, let me clarify something. So if you watch the earlier videos, the flywheel right now has a lock on it. We took the belt off, and the camshafts have not been moved because once the old timing belt was off, they were independent of the crankshaft. So with the crankshaft lock, it was imperative that we do not move the camshafts at all. Otherwise, with it being an interference motor, we could damage things even if it's just sitting there. So I mark one. So that's a convenient mark there. I believe it's for top dead center. The car's not there right now, but it's all relative with this system. I use some white paint to mark that marking on the timing cover as well as the cam gear. And that allows me to turn it just one tooth, like the instructions say. I get the belt taut and then move it over back one, and it took a little bit of finagling to get the feel down, but once we had that, you can see in this section here I have a clamp on it to hold it in place, but it is now taut with the oil relative to the oil pump. Now we're routing the belt underneath the water pump, and now a similar procedure for the passenger side cam belt. So again, we're going to go through the marking procedure, move it over one, now counterclockwise one, and then back again, and we slowly finagle it, and the cog is back to where it needs to be, and we clamp that down. There's a shot of the cam belt in place. We just have the clamps on it right now because the tensioner is not tensioned just yet. There's a little bit more work. So with the belt in place, I'll take you through that. All right. This is one of the mounting bolts. It's a countersunk screw. I'm putting in that place, and I decided to put some medium thread locker on that. Putting in the other bolts, and in this shot, I'm putting in that Audi cylinder back in. Now you see this pin is still in it. We'll get to that in a second. So once that's mounted and torqued down, so what you're about to see me do is install an 8mm Allen wrench into the idler wheel of the Porken Tensioner. Here's a close-up. All right, so what's going to happen here? So you see me putting in an 8mm wrench into that wheel. There's a slot for that. Just to the left of that is that pull pin mounted on the Audi timing belt tensioner cylinder. And you can see the eccentric on that rocker arm that's made it up to it. So the procedure here is I'm going to rotate the idler wheel on the Porken Tensioner, and just enough to finally put tension, the remaining tension on the belt, and then that's going to let Nick pull the pin now that we have everything in place. I'm putting tension on it. I move it counterclockwise. That's enough for him to pull the pin, and now the system's under tension. That's it. No adjustment necessary. The belt is nice and taut. Now with the system under tension from the Audi cylinder, I'm taking a torque wrench and putting about 11 foot-pounds of torque on the system just to make sure it's fully tensioned. And with that in place, you'll see us here. We're very pleased with how everything is. The camshafts never moved, so we're convinced the timings should be good. All right, so now we start. There's some slight reassembly here. We're going to put the harmonic balancer on. That only goes one way. So with the, I just gently tap that in. You have to be gentle with these. Just, an orange hammer like that, soft blow hammer, just enough to get it in because you don't want to ruin the material inside that. And then we put the cone pulley and the pulley that mates to the tensioner back on. That is a big-ass torque wrench capable of 218 foot-pounds of torque we just put on that. That's what you needed to put on the crank pulley bolt. If you recall, we had the flywheel locked. So now here I am underneath the car, removing that and installing the factory plate because this is an automatic equipped car. That's where the clutch slave cylinder goes.
Yeah?
Okay. I don't hear anything, right?
No, it's good.
One more time. So we were very pleased with the Porken Tensioner install. It was pretty straightforward. Got it done pretty much in about a half a day. So overall, as of right now, we would highly recommend replacing the factory tensioner system with the Porken Tensioner. It's worth the money. I'm sure long term it'll be even worth more because you don't have to worry about timing belt adjustments. The install was pretty straightforward. We did call out to 928's R Us Roger there and had one question. And actually, he's going to have the designer of this modify the instructions because the one section for the S2 version that we use for this car talks about shaved heads and using a second bolt, and it didn't make sense to us. So I'm not going to confuse the issue. You saw it was a pretty straightforward install, and very pleased. So onward and upward. So right now, as you see the car behind me, everything's back in. We're trying to diagnose a fuel issue, what I think is a fuel issue because the car won't start. That'll be for another day. So thank you for watching. If you're enjoying these videos, please by all means subscribe and hit the like button so you know when the next video is up. And if you haven't checked it out yet, please visit our main website, guyswithrides.com. We've started doing online collector car auctions, but we do things a bit differently around here. And I think when you listen through all of the advantages our auctions offer, you may want to consider either bidding on the cars we have or listing a car of your own. Thanks again. Happy New Year to all, and we'll see you soon. Stay safe.